have got that with the mic on as well. Hello, and welcome back to The Cine Skinny. It is the film podcast from The Skinny Magazine. No Anna Heat this week. She's on a writing retreat.
Yeah, something fancy, something posh.
I know, and she's left us in the post-industrial ruins of our office in town. It's me with Elliot and Jamie. Say hello, both.
Hi.
Hi, Pierre.
How are you both?
Pretty good. I'm still post-Oscars kind of sleepy. Like I haven't got my sleep pattern back yet. So this is why when you're in your 40s, you shouldn't stay awake for the Oscars. You just can't do it. It's a young man's game, you know?
Ellie, how are you getting on?
I'm good. I didn't stay up for the Oscars. I got a great night's sleep.
Well, what a positive start to the day. Truly, all of life's rich tapestry on this episode of The Cine Skinny. We're going to talk about the Oscars a bit in a minute. We're going to talk about Arco, the new kind of French retro-futurist animation that was nominated for an Oscar but didn't win it. And we're also going to talk about Good Boy, aka The Good Boy, the new Stephen Graham and Andrea Riseborough. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the Glasgow Short Film Festival, which starts the day that this podcast comes out. So in fact, it actually started the day before this podcast came out. I've just realised. So I hope it all went going well. That's enough preamble. Let's talk about the Oscars. So, Jamie, you stayed up all night. Did you have some kind of? Did you have an Oscars party? Let's do the preamble first.
No, I realised that Oscar parties are terrible because nobody's into like I have had an Oscar party before, and it was. I realised that nobody actually cares about the Oscars, so people are just talking over all the speeches and stuff. So I got quite annoyed and got huffy that night. So I'm not allowed to have an Oscar party anymore. Essentially, I like asked Bjorn about that night. Who went?
I think actually you told us about it around this time last year. So were you just solemnly watching it with your little notepad and your pendant that just says film on it?
Yeah, everyone else was just having a great time, and I was just glued to the screen trying to like hear the like Adrian Brody and stuff like that chat while people were having fun.
Nice. So. No fun this year though. Just straight.
Just watched it.
Just sat down, gave it a watch. Right.
Had some snacks.
So what are we talking snacks wise? I'm trying to pad this out to a full segment of the podcast.
We had some popcorn.
Nice. Sweet, salted, toffee, butter.
Well, I don't think we actually ate it, but we had both types, and then we had.
Sorry, right.
We had it as an option.
Ceremonial
you have
popcorn.
helped me out no end here, Jamie. What do you mean you had it but you didn't eat it?
That was one of the options. We also had lots of like crudité, so we just like
for a not party. This was not an Oscars party.
Yeah, just like I like little snacks for the Oscars.
Respect.
It sounds like this has gone from being like film journalist's home Oscars party to hamster being like that. It's like, I had this popcorn, I didn't eat it, just loads of crudités. So you mean you were sat in the house in the dark eating a carrot? Yeah. Or a piece of cucumber, pepper, maybe. Did you have some hummus?
There was it was celery and carrot. Some hummus.
I'm sorry. I don't wish to be unkind. Those are the bleakest crudité.
They're good.
You can't just be sitting there eating celery. Also, just if anyone's jumped forward 3 minutes, this is a film podcast. Right. So you sat in the dark eating celery.
Yeah.
What did you hope would happen, and what did happen? This both applies to your life and the Oscars, which occurred on Sunday night.
Well, I was actually looking forward to the Oscars. I think for the first time in a long time, it felt like it could go like a lot of the categories could go either way. Like it was like best actor wasn't really a lock yet. The best film I don't think was really like there wasn't really a proper favourite. But then everything just did go to this kind of slight margin of the favourite, like for the bookies. So it was actually kind of boring. I've come to realise that actually the Oscars, what they try and do is like because they've got this big long Oscar sort of race. Like so you get like months of like prognosticating. That's correct. Anyway, lots of journalists predicting who's going to win. We get all the awards.
Were you going for prognosticate?
Prognosticating is the word I was trying for.
It sounded like you were trying to say prostituting.
Well, there's also a little bit of that as well.
Yeah.
You know, like everybody's trying to advertise themselves. There's a lot of kind of like, you know, there's like and we get all the other awards. We get the BAFTAs, we get the SAGs, we get the Gothams, Golden Globes. So you have got a good sense of who's going to win. So you build up to the big night, but really, it's actually not that exciting because we know who's going to win.
It also has that thing that like it is a decision that's been made by someone that has nothing to do with you personally, especially if you're just a film fan or a lower rung film journalist like us. Like, nobody asks us who we want to win the Oscars, much less gives us a vote. So that's one thing. You also have the thing that, like, people are making comments about a decision that's literally already been made as if it hasn't been made, which is a classic of the modern news genre. You talk about how, like, oh, but, you know, it could go either way. It's like, well, no, it's already, the die is like, it's literally going to go one way or the other. And, you know, it's not as if they're going to be like, oh, actually, there was an extra nominee that we didn't tell you about, secret jump scare nominee.
Well, this is why, like, I think they need to shake it up. I think they should put the Oscars at the start. So instead of building up to the Oscars and then it being an anticlimax because we know exactly how it's going to play out and there's no surprise, have it at the beginning, or change something about the voting so, like, there is some surprises. Because, yeah, I feel like, if anything, like, the BAFTAs were more enjoyable.
I was going to say, is that not what BAFTA did? BAFTA used to be after the Oscars, didn't it? And then they moved it forward, or am I just making that up?
I think what the BAFTAs changed was they now have a jury who picks the shortlist. So what you do is you get some sort of strange choices in the shortlist, and actually that's brought up some like unusual results. Like Richard Aramayo, for example, winning Best Actor was a massive surprise, like, to everyone. And, like, maybe he wouldn't have been on the shortlist if it was just the general BAFTA voters voting initially. It's like, I think the jury gives people permission to, like, go outside the kind of perceived, like, Oscar frontrunners as their kind of, like, shortlist. So, yeah, like, I think it needs a change, definitely. I think the sense of excitement has gone, and I think that is part of the reason why maybe people don't sit up to watch the Oscars anymore. Like, I think that's part of they keep saying the ratings are falling every year, and part of it is, like, it does seem like a foregone conclusion most years, and even this year when it did seem a bit closer, it kind of fell as people expected. So
It is kind of like, I don't know, I think that the actual awards and which films win, they're quite fallible, and people always tend to kind of disagree with the Academy on a lot of counts. So I think that maybe, like, a big part of what people, like, think the Oscars is for that level of ceremony, is for all the celebrities and all the viral moments. So when, I don't know, I'm not going to stay up for instances like this where nothing happened. Nobody disgraced themselves. There was no scandals or international incidents or, you know, brief flashes of madness and violence.
There was circumstance, but there was very little pomp.
Exactly.
And I'm sorry, I need both. If you're going to make me stay up till 3 a.m, I need both.
And, like, I think you're right. Like, it was an interesting Oscars in the sense that there were loads of nominees up for Best Picture that, like, are really solid films, and that can be kind of nail biting, but it wasn't massively surprising where things went. And I do think that, like, Sinners and One Battle After Another definitely deserve their flowers, but, you know, and it's just the fact that, like, I think that they tell us what people are wanting out of films more. These kind of, like, I don't know, sort of big dramatic showdowns, but in interesting places with interesting characters who are under oppression and forming communities and stuff like that. And, you know, I think that, like, The Secret Agent and It Was Just an Accident and the Joachim Trier one, like, they're all, like, great films, but they're much smaller in scale. They're much, like, more sort of structurally unconventional. They're foreign language. And the Academy, they don't like that. That's for Cannes, baby.
I also think it's like this year has been a rare example of the two best films are both a bit arty and a bit commercial. And they're both, like, very, like, critically acclaimed and beloved by audiences. They're both quite similar to each other in a way, but also, like, speak to very different perspectives. And then when you get to the Oscars, like, the only conversation or argument that people can have is that it is disrespectful to one to award a prize to the other. And that's, like, that just kind of shows that, as with any example of picking something that you want to award, you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Well, you do this thing where you have to, like, they have to be in competition with each other. Why can't you like both films and just be happy for both films? You know, it's this kind of, like, there has to be an enemy. You know, like, you have to be like like, this is the whole thing about, like I say, the critics talking about it for so long, they have to build up all these narratives. You know, like, Timothée Chalamet has to become evil. You know, like, it becomes like we now hate Timmy for some reason because he said something about opera.
Slagged off opera.
You know, like,
that's my boy.
I mean, okay, he's a bit of an arse, but, like, it's not the worst thing in the world, you know. But yeah, he had so much bad press about that does kind of turn the tide a little bit.
Yeah, but it's also, like, the way that the whole machine works is that the story that is told is that has turned the tide a bit. Whereas actually that might have had literally, it's a secret ballot, that might have had literally nothing to do with it. People might have wanted to give it to Michael B. Jordan anyway. Like there might be people who are voting who are saying like, well, I'm probably going to give One Battle After Another my best picture vote. And I might give PTA my best director vote. So I want to make sure that I don't not give Sinners anything. Or they might have just thought like Michael B. Jordan was 2 actors in that film. And that's much harder than being 1 actor in a film. That's what Wagner Moura was 3 actors in a film. And as you said, even with the handicap of that film being in Portuguese, a language which many members of the Academy do not speak, they still gave him a nomination. So, yeah.
I think it does sometimes show the kind of more institutional thinking of the Academy. I think that K-pop Demon Hunters won Best Animated Feature, and I do kind of think that this is a situation where that's like a film is kind of like got its merits because it's known. That seems like a huge part of it. Like everyone has seen K-pop Demon Hunters a million times if their kids want to see it, you know? Whereas if you were to ask me, like, is the animation, is it as an animated film, like better than all of the fellow nominees? That's way more subjective. And I actually think not really. I think we're about to talk about Arco, which I enjoyed way more as a film than K-pop Demon Hunters, which, you know, I'm not going to slag off K-pop. I'd like to keep my legs. I've got better sense than that, you know? But it's like a little bit, you know, it's a little bit worse than Spider-Verse was almost 10 years ago in terms of its animation. So I can't help but feel like the reputation and the renown of a film plays a huge part in like how people approach the vote.
Yeah, and the whole thing is like, as has been discussed for years and years and years at this point, it's like the biggest, most weaponized popularity contest that you've ever seen in your life. And the months and months and months of, you know, behind the scenes glad handing and bribery is all the stuff that Jamie's talking about of like, oh, you have to create these now, because like you have to create a story around it. Classic bit of journalism. You have to create a story around something, because just saying that like the guys from insert film studio here so I don't get sued are just turning up and offering people one thing or another in order to vote for their film is not as interesting of a story. It's like, what if I told you that all of these people were out for themselves predominantly and their friends secondarily?
One thing I liked about the ceremony is that Conan O'Brien, he had a lot of attacks at that kind of idea of like movies are dead, you know, like, so he had a lot of jokes about Netflix, for example. He had the Netflix chief was in the audience and he said, this is your first time in a theatre, you must be so confused, you know, like you should be watching this at home on your own, shouldn't you? Or like there was a kind of, one of the better bits was like he did a kind of bit where like films are going to be recut for phones to make them taller and narrower, but then he shows all these classic films where the widescreen is like the point of the film, and like, so I think when Harry Met Sally, you're watching nothing in the middle because they're having a conversation either side of the, so like that's what I like, and it happens. It's happening now because we have a situation where we have the 2 frontrunners, Sinners and One Battle, were both from Warner Brothers as well. So this is the kind of irony of the show. Like this is exactly what Hollywood wants: 2 original ideas, which were, like you say, box office hits and critical successes and Oscar successes, but the studio is in peril and may not exist. Or is going to be bought by like God knows who, Netflix, Paramount, we're not too sure. So that's the kind of irony we're in right now. So like I liked how that seemed to be pushed back a bit by the show, and certainly Conan O'Brien, that was kind of his main kind of thrust.
Yeah, and somebody did also point out as a final thing that getting Matt Berry to do all of the announcements of the winners did make the whole thing seem a bit like a really elaborate joke.
Those were the only clips that I did see when I woke up in the morning, and I was very pleased with them. I'm just going like, Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
They also brought the Bridesmaids, the girls back, which was quite a nice little bit.
Yeah. This is the first Academy Award for Paul Thomas Anderson.
I think it won't forget Antonio Banderas.
Yeah. Lovely stuff. Okay, so that was the Oscars. Right, let's do some reviews. Let's leave the Oscars in the past and talk about a film that is also going to leave the Oscars in the past because it didn't win the one it was nominated for. It's a film called Arco. Who's Arco? Arco's a little boy from the future. He's living in a futuristic treetop world in, I believe, the 2900s, complete with time travel technology that he isn't allowed to use there yet because he is too young of a boy. So he borrows his sister's time travel cloak and flies into our near future, which is his distant past, and meets some humanoid robots, a trio of zoot suit wearing oafs, and a sweet and lonely girl named Iris. This is the aforementioned Oscar-nominated animation by French director Hugo Bienvenu, who, side note, sounds like the joke name you would give a Frenchman if you were trying to come up with something on the fly. The English dub voice cast includes Natalie Portman, who also produced the film, Mark Ruffalo, Andy Samberg, Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Will Ferrell. Ellie, what a setup, what a premise. I think anyone taking even the most cursory look at this will say, Ghibli, 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 Ghibli. This looks like a film and sounds like a film by Studio Ghibli. But as we said in the office beforehand, if you're going to knock something off, go for the champ. And I think, I don't know about you, this has got some lovely Studio Ghibli-esque moments in it.
Yes, 100%. It's a style of animation that I'll always want more of. Because also it's hard to do. Like, it requires a lot of effort. It's got these wonderfully drawn 2D, digitally drawn characters who I think in some instances are rotoscoped, very closely mimicking what people actually move like. The backgrounds are watercolor paintings, very bright and lush, small town setting. So it will just on the surface look like Studio Ghibli for that. They both have these very substantial styles and very pastoral styles, but there's also an overlap in the themes. It's a coming of age story, with Arco coming back to the past. He's a bit of a fish out of water in a magical world with Iris is the main character. She's this very sweet girl, but she's thoughtful and independent in a way that the parents aren't. The adults in this world are either absent or, as you say, buffoons. One thing that I think doesn't show up in every Studio Ghibli film, I think it's shown up in the earlier ones, but not in more of the recent ones, is this theme of environmentalism, which is a huge part of the future speculation of the film. It feels like a theme that's really core to all animated cinema. I think as early as Watership Down and Fern Gully, animators have always drawn a lot of inspiration from the natural world, so it makes sense that their films are always about the ways in which these worlds are in danger.
The thing is, if your bread and butter is anthropomorphic animals, and then all the animals go extinct,
exactly,
no one's going to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's very sweet. It's very sweet.
Try and put a Robin Hood hat on a Roomba. It's not going to work. But anyway, as you are.
I mean, recently we've also had films like that, Flow and The Wild Robot, both last year, I think, were very similar in that it's not trying to kind of create this, maybe 20th century narrative about how we all need to come together, reduce, reuse, and recycle, but rather that things are bad and that climate disaster is inevitable. And there is hope that maybe we can kind of build some sort of community among and after it. But also very Ghibli-esque are these buffoons. Like I said, it's a world where the adults are more ridiculous than the kids, and you've got these three stooges in solid zoot suits and sunglasses who are just sort of scrambling over each other, making their way through the film. I loved them. The voice cast of them, Will Ferrell, Andy Samberg, and Flea, is great just because, I don't know, it's a sort of more subtle role for them. I think that, Will Ferrell used to be such a comedy titan, and I think people kind of, he doesn't really fit in that space anymore, but he can just bring that kind of slapstick energy to a voice role, which I don't think is an easy thing to do. In general, the casting is great. Like you say, Mark Ruffalo and Natalie Portman are also the kind of heavy hitters in this. They play Iris's parents, but because they're absent, they're working in the city, far away. They only hologram call in, but the android who takes care of the kids speaks simultaneously with both of their voices, which is a really cool detail and a really cool character, really cool performance. As a matter of fact, I find it quite lovely that people's growing cynicism towards AI hasn't gotten in the way of our ability to imagine stories about lovely robots. And it's a very lovely robot. I cried. It's such a sweet film. But yeah, I mean, I had a great time. It is patently Ghibli-esque, but I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I looked on Wikipedia and it said something that was a team of 130 people to kind of create this, which, is great. You want to see animation that takes a lot of work, a lot of detail, and creates really elaborate worlds. And sometimes I think with, I don't know, the reason that Disney has not, if you're talking about the Oscars, Disney-owned studio hasn't won an Oscar in the last 5 years. And I think it's for that reason that they're very corner cutting, that they're appealing to a very post CG animated market. And this feels I don't know, playing about in a space that, it is a much more old-fashioned way of animation, which for its futurist themes I thought was actually really appropriate.
Yeah. Jamie, what did you think of Arco? A child who I initially called a robot, and I said to you I was like, oh, Arco, is that the one with the little boy's robot? It's like, no, it's the one where the little boy meets a robot. It's like, okay, cool.
You get it right. I thought this was incredibly charming. I think the best thing about it is probably its world building. It sets us up with these two future worlds. Like you say, one is I think 2075, where Iris lives. That's kind of the bleakest future. It's looks actually not too far from our own future. It's
the thing about the 2075 world, I kind of alluded to this earlier, that is the classic world that is like what somebody from the 1950s or 60s would imagine the future to look like. Yeah. In that it has this weird thing that it's very good world building because they don't draw attention to it, that everybody is obsessed with like music and culture and like cars and design from America in the 1950s, but then their houses all have these like protective bubbles over them and everybody's walking around with robots and holographic glasses.
Exactly. So so I think it's quite a believable future, this idea that you have these kind of wildfires and typhoons that, people are like, technology has protected us from them to some extent. We've got these literal bubbles around houses, and we're just ignoring the fact that like it's burning outside, which seems like very sort of apt for today. You've also got this idea of like your kids are now being basically all menial labor, but like you're from like taking out the trash to like fixing up all the damage by the kind of climate crisis is being done by kind of AI robots, and then you're also offloading that job to your kids, which is kind of quite bleak. And that's it's like you've got this little kid who's basically been taken care of by a nanny who's a robot, and her parents are absent. So it's kind of bleak kind of setup, and then it gives you the kind of flip side, this kind of future, which is actually kind of utopian. This idea that we're all living in communes in the sky, eating fresh fruit and just chilling, which and time traveling, which seems lovely. So it's like it gives you both kind of flavors, really, which I quite liked. Yeah, I did like this film. I feel like maybe it gets a little bit like what happens to a lot of kids' films. It becomes a bit hyperactive, and it becomes a big chase movie like halfway through, which is, which I don't enjoy. Maybe they're doing that because it's also trying to appeal to children and be kind of fun and colourful and hyperactive. I thought it was much more appealing when it is in that kind of Ghibli mode of being quite I can't speak today. What am I trying to say?
Give him time. He's going to get it.
I can't say it.
Contemplative.
Contemplative.
I'm not even sure that's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Contemplative. It's contemplating. Oh, fucking hell. Right, okay. Let's start. It's contemplating the future.
Thoughtful. It's very thoughtful. About like...
Wise.
Yeah. Yes. And a bit kind of quieter and it's a bit more melancholy. And it does have its kicking into, it is like sort of saying that AI is going to destroy the world, but also there can be one good AI who saves everyone as well, which is, probably true. It's a bit like WALL-E or something.
It's what you would expect when you know the backstory that like the 100 and odd animators worked on this film, but they also used like an AI voice synthesizer to do the thing where Natalie Portman and Mark Ruffalo talk simultaneously as Mickey the robot.
Yeah. So it's like a little bit mixed in its kind of messaging, but that's okay. Yeah, and just the world building's great. I just love like the tree house that everybody lives in the future, and like your beds are like these kind of anti-gravity sort of pods, and the idea that people are flying around in rainbows. Yeah, it's just like very imaginative, very, very fun. I think a kid watching this will get a lot out of it and sort of enjoy the kind of creativity of the ideas at play. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to fault this film. It's just like lovely. It's just a bit derivative maybe in style of Ghibli, and it does that kind of thing that all kids' films have to do, is like be kind of like wacky and crazy in the middle.
Yeah. It does look beautiful. It is a lovely film to just watch, and I feel like one that would definitely, I mean, if it comes on streaming, you'll enjoy it, but go and see it in the cinema, because it'll look very, very nice. I really like the Iron Giant-esque, speaking of if you're going to take someone's idea and have a go at it, pick a good one. I really like the Iron Giant-esque design of the robot Mickey. I like the detail of making Mickey dress as the dress for the job that he wants. So Iris comes home from school and Mickey is doing the dishes, and is doing the dishes wearing an apron. Why? What's the point? But yeah, I think it is it's a nice film with a good message that looks great and is very inventive. And actually, as much as I have decried its visual similarities to another animation studio, there are actually some quite surreal flourishes to it and some like quite interesting imagery. One of the things that they do in the future and make like really good use of, and I'm partly saying this because I went to see David Byrne at the Armadillo a couple of weeks ago, they sort of imply that like all of the classrooms in the high school have these floor-to-ceiling projections on them. So when they're teaching you about space, they can show you the solar system, which would, I don't know what the educational merit of that is, but there you go.
Every class is like a planetarium, essentially.
Yeah. But what that means is that you can get some quite weird and interesting visuals out of, say, being chased through a series of connected rooms, each of which is taking you into a different bit of the Earth biome.
Yeah, and then that means Arco can see dinosaurs, because that's what sets it off
in the first place.
Like even kids in the future care about dinosaurs. So like if you have a little cape, you can go back and see all the dinosaurs.
Yeah, There is an element that maybe it's teaching children irresponsible things about putting a cape on and jumping off the roof, but NVM, I think people are taught that like if the kids watch it all the way through, they'll realize it's not a good idea.
He learns his lesson, I think.
Does. Yeah. Someone strapping their parents watch their head and throwing themselves off the roof of a building. Let's hope that doesn't happen. And if it does, we can't blame it on Arco, a good film that we all enjoyed. But how much did we enjoy it? Ellie?
4 stars.
Excellent. Jamie?
I'm going to get 3.5. I thought it was really good.
Nice. I like the way you just had to knock it down a little bit.
He just loves disagreeing.
No, it's very good. I'd say go and see it.
I'm going to say 4 stars and also say go and see it. It is out in the UK from this Friday. Right, next up, The Good Boy, or Goodbye, or Heel. It has been unclear what the official title of this film is.
Yeah, it's always a bad sign when a film changes its name about 5 times. Like, is it because it got bad reviews? Is it because, I don't know, they're trying to like remarket it?
There was another film called Good Boy that came out like last October.
The one about the dog?
In a haunted house, yeah. And I think doesn't mean anything, but I did look on Letterboxd and the top review was like, I was at a film festival and I thought I was going to see a haunted house film about a dog. And then this shit happened.
I bet you're wondering how I got here. I am also wondering how I got here. No, in this Good Boy, Tommy is a late teenage runaway tearaway more than a runaway, who's taken in by married couple Chris and Catherine. They plan to rehabilitate him through a variety of what I'm going to euphemistically refer to as unconventional methods, including hitting him with sticks and locking him in the basement. Anson Boone plays Tommy. Stephen Graham and Andrea Riseborough, fucking hell, 2 people you would not want locking you in a basement, are Chris and Catherine. And this is directed by Polish director Jan Komasa. Interesting fact about this is Jerzy Skolimowski brought the script to Jan Komasa and said, you should make this film. And then Jan Komasa went to go and try and make it. And then it was originally in Polish and set in Warsaw. And then they moved it to be in English and set it in Yorkshire. And the description on the Wikipedia page says they moved it to Yorkshire to make it have more mass appeal, which I really enjoy because of how biased the UK media is against anything that's not from London. It's good to know that these things really do cascade down. Mm-hmm. It's one big pyramid all the way down with central, or probably these days, North London at the top. Mm-hmm. But yes, so this is Jan Komasa's The Good Boy. Now, Jamie, you've seen this film.
I have.
Seems like it's got a good pedigree. Stephen Graham, very good. Andrea Riseborough, very good. Interesting premise. But then also, like you said, always worrying when a film seems to be trying to sand the name off before the car makes it off the production line. What did you think of this film?
Yeah, I don't think it should be worrying. I think whether it's called The Good Boy or Heel or just Good Boy, I think it's a decent film. I think in my head I expected a horror film or some sort of like psychological torture movie or something, and like people were talking about Clockwork Orange. So I had like all these kind of ideas of what it was going to be like in my head, and then I actually watched it. It's a bit stranger and actually more interesting than all that. It's essentially a dark comedy about families and how basically like families are quite a fucked up dysfunctional thing, and sometimes they need a sort of level of confinement and kind of emotional blackmail to like function properly, which sounds like a horrible idea, but actually it kind of works out in quite a satisfying way in the film. So yeah, so it's a troubling idea, but because it's kind of like slightly off reality, I feel like kind of could go with its premise, because Tommy is an absolute shitbag, and while Stephen Graham and Andrew Riseborough's kind of are kind of mad, they're really not bad people, and actually their misguided approach does seem to work to a certain extent. Yeah, so like why it works is the performances are really good. I think Anson Boone is actually excellent as Tommy. It's quite a hard role. You have to be... I think the film works a lot because you believe his transformation, going from this absolute shitbag, this monster who just terrorizes his like hometown and like bullies people and sort of is horrible to women, and he goes on this kind of journey, you know, like, so there's a moment where like they make him watch Kess, like, and I genuinely believe this guy was having an emotional moment while watching Kess. But what's great about it is he looks so shocked and angry that he's actually having this emotional moment, you know, like when Casper finds the dead bird and he's like, he starts to cry and he says, I need to leave. But like it's really believable, like his performance, and you get similar from all the cast. There's the young kid, the younger son of the family called Jonathan, has this kind of thing going on where he's like very kind of enthusiastic and very kind of cheery, but behind the eyes he looks terrified. So everybody's playing this kind of double role. Like Stephen Graham does it as well. Stephen Graham's like this authoritarian figure who literally beats up Tommy with a truncheon at one point, but he looks so pained while he's doing it. So he's this kind of like he's this kind of authoritarian kind of like jailer, but he's also like actually a dad who's a bit disappointed in his son at the same time. So like everything like through the film is sort of working on these both levels. And then Andrea Riseborough is just like off her nuts. She's like so whispery and strange and quite disturbed. And you think, oh, maybe she's sort of traumatized, but actually she might be the craziest person in the whole house. So yeah, like I really enjoyed how everything's just a bit off in the film. And it makes sense that it because I think this is like, you can tell it's like not from like a British sensibility. Like it comes from this kind of Eastern European, Polish sensibility, and it's got that kind of like, I mean, I can understand that Jerzy Skolimowski would like this because it's got the same thing that his films has, where they're all a bit like surreal and absurd and like off kilter, but also kind of quite absurdly funny. And it's got a bit of Harold Pinter in there. Yeah, I just thought it was like a really good film. And although some things are a bit undercooked, like for example, there's a maid who I think is from Poland. Her kind of character's a bit underwritten and sort of disappears. So there's things that aren't perfect about it, but I was quite satisfied and quite surprised by how much I enjoyed it and how much I just went along with its kind of strange premise.
I kind of agree. Like, it was an interesting experience. Like, I really enjoyed sitting down with this film and just watching it unfold and trying to work out what it's trying to say and where it's trying to come from. Because you're right, like that synopsis is nuts, and it seems really intimidating to get into because it is essentially, yeah, like a disturbed, you know, upper middle class family who are trying to rehabilitate a violent hooligan through captivity and torture. Like, that doesn't really sound fun, but immediately that comedic tone is there, that dark comedic tone is there because of this dissonance, because like the first thing that like Stephen Graham starts doing, because the kid like drives around in his car like, you know, dangerously doing drugs and stuff like that, Stephen Graham makes him watch a homemade driver instructional safety video where he's like standing next to a bypass and a high vis, just like terribly dictating this script, and it's so disarming, and in that kind of like dissonance where the family themselves don't even realize their own violent actions is like really comedic, and there is like a lot of kind of discussion going on. I think like just the idea itself is this idea of class. It's also an idea of like there's a mention of like a generational thing where Stephen Graham says that this is a result of, you know, Tommy being from this generation who kind of like don't take responsibility, who don't, who, you know, kind of center everything around their own victimhood. And like you say, there's like other little things like this character who has like an uncertain immigration status, and she's kind of like the cleaner of the house, so it gives us some perspective that way. But some of them do feel a little bit undercooked, and it really feels like less so than the script, it is the actors who are doing all the social commentary. I think that it is great to see Stephen Graham doing something that does immediately feel different to his usual kinds of roles. So mild-mannered and gentle, but with like you say, like a lot of restrained contempt and this kind of like very shaky balance that he's trying to keep over his household, this sort of like very fickle sense of moral superiority he has. That's where the commentary, I think, on class and the patriarchy come from. It's in Stephen Graham's performance. Anson Boone, who plays Tommy, does like a really good job of making him like a believable shitbag. Like, he really is the kind of guy you would just hate to run into just being out and about in your hometown or whatever. But he also has a job of like, showing that he's capable of growth. We kind of like do feel that he's our hero in a way, because he never deserves really what he's being treated with, but he also like is, because of this, reckoning with his own cruelty and his own indifference. So it's a very multidimensional role. And I agree, Andrea Riseborough is like this ghost who just wanders around the house, is very catatonic, and even the little boy is like believably, I think there's a scene where he's just sitting with Stephen Graham and like doing maths homework, and he's just staring at it perplexed, crying, and Graham's getting like frustrated and like, you can do this because you're not stupid because you did the last one. And I was like, oh my god, that is the most relatable thing ever. Not only do I remember that happening when I was a little kid, my parents justified it by saying it happened to them when they were a little kid. Why is one of our like national pastimes making children cry at maths homework? It's so
it's
weirdly
the big pyramid, Ellie.
It's those fucking integers. Still not over it. So I don't know. There's like a nice little metaphorical thing here about how, like, in a very literal and quite comedic way, Tommy is chained up in the basement, but everyone else in the family is kind of trapped in these roles. I don't think that I like fully enjoyed it. The thing is, like, I was having a really good time with the film and kind of wondering where it's going to go. And I have to say that the ending is kind of pointless. It really does feel like the last 10 minutes, like it kind of immediately changes track and wants to talk about something else. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but like they bring back a character from the opening 5 minutes of the film, and they even have to give her like a name at the very end there, because she's been so kind of unimportant to the characters and the audience so far. She's sort of pulled into the center of the story in what I think is quite a clumsy way to demonstrate the changes that have occurred in the characters, when really like just watching the changes occur was the real valuable part of the film. So, I don't know, like it's a weird one. I think it's one of those ones that doesn't really stick the landing, but unlike a lot of films, it doesn't really matter, because the beginning and the middle and like the real meat of the film is kind of just so enjoyable. Such good performances.
Yeah, I think they're trying to go for like a kind of grace note, like a real kind of like emotional ending that didn't quite. I get it, but like I guess I don't quite get. The film is like, I'm not exactly sure exactly what it's trying to say, and I don't know if I agree with what it says, but I like how it says it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I quite buy the premise, and I don't think I buy the idea that to be happy, you need this kind of family unit that is slightly dysfunctional and you kind of have to go along with it.
Yeah.
I actually disagree with that, but the performances are so good and the filmmaking is so surprising that I kind of did. If that makes sense. So yeah, I ended up rather enjoying it because for me, just because it exists in a world that doesn't feel realistic. So like it seems so, everything's so kind of allegorical in the film that I can just go along with it. Even though, yeah, it probably is, if you analyse what it's saying, is actually quite right-wing and kind of weird, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's very, well, I don't know, like, obviously Tommy is the kind of guy who needs growth, but then he kind of develops Stockholm Syndrome, right? Yeah. Like, that is funny and weird and dissonant and a bit, like, awkward to unpick. And I don't think that it is really, like, I don't think it's really getting to the heart of, like, why Tommy is the way he is. I think there's a really brief implication that it's because of something to do with his background, because of the way he was raised is why he's like this violent psychopath. But it's really not interested in interrogating why it is that young people become like violent offenders. And it's really not interested in like, I don't know, like trying to discuss like what the actual way through is or anything like that. It is kind of just like putting these characters in this really bizarre situation, and all of the actors are absolutely selling what they would do in that situation. So you really do follow along with the character development and you really do kind of get invested in it. And I think the ending is maybe where you do reveal that like they don't have a tight grip on the themes that they're discussing. It's just that the performances themselves are so enjoyable.
Well, what a lot to unpick. And actually, what a lot to... I've not seen this film, and now I want to. What an ideal segment of the podcast. So yeah, The Good Boy, depending on what title it ends up with by the time it makes it to UK cinemas, will be out this Friday, the 20th of March, out of 5. Ellie, what do you think?
I'm going to say 3.5.
Jamie?
Also 3.5. 3.5. It's very good.
Excellent. So yeah, that's The Good Boy. It's out this Friday. And finally for this week, Glasgow Short Film Festival returns this weekend. In fact, as I garbled earlier, it's already returned. It is at venues across Glasgow this weekend. I'll just say it again. Glasgow Short Film Festival is back this weekend. with a whole bunch of short film programs from across Scotland and beyond. Now, short films, Jamie, are good because they're like a selection box. You can get through a whole load of different stuff in handy, manageable sizes. You know, watching a whole film, that's good. But watching a lot of short films in order, you can get a lot of different things out of it, can't you?
So true.
Thanks. So, that was a setup and just like donk, a little short one. Like, don't try and hit a home run every time. Just make contact with the ball. Anyway, so we pulled out 3 films from the kind of Scottish competition program that we're going to talk about. And I think the best way to talk about them, partly because Jamie has just confessed that he's very hungry, and we've got a meeting shortly, so we want to try and get some lunch in beforehand. This is not to downplay the significance of Glasgow Short Film Festival, but I think it is a useful way to think about it, that we looked at 3 films from the program that are all actually very different, but they show what you can do with the short film format. There's things that you can try, and there's directions you can go in that might be more difficult to do in a long-form feature. And Daniel Kelly's short film Monogamy is, I think, a good example of this thing to which I am referring. So this is a short film about a couple who are kind of appear to be a happy couple, but are also kind of exploring being with other people outside of their relationship. And the way that this is portrayed, Jamie, is actually quite interesting and quite kind of like experimental / non-standard, I would say. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of like what the kind of film that we don't really make in Scotland. Like, this is the thing, like, short film, like you say, because it doesn't have the kind of imperative that it has to make money back, or it has to be like, or it doesn't have like loads of kind of like funders who want to look at the script and tell you what you should do and what you shouldn't do. They can actually be a bit freer. So this to me has a kind of whiff of like mumblecore, a bit of Richard Linklater kind of style. It's just a very simple relationship film. It's like the first kind of 5 minutes or something is like we get to know a couple and we just spend some time with them in this kind of very intimate setting where they're kind of just like kind of almost post-coital. They're kind of like rolling around in bed. They're kind of like just making some food, like just being very intimate. But it's like what you don't really see quite often in film. You know, like it's just people just being themselves. Like these kind of intimate moments that are always behind screen. You know, like if you watch a romantic comedy, like everybody's kind of performing, whereas this is much more like it's just like a couple being real.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that I found about this one is that like the narrative is not the main driver. Certainly in the first part of this short, the narrative is like, and when you talk about romantic comedies, like romantic features, a lot of the time the characters are just describing what the next bit of plot we're going to get to is. And they're like, I can't believe that they're like that. Anyway, I have to go and meet John at the bank where I work with my best friend, Anne.
Yeah. It's like it's not got that kind of schematic quality, but it does have a kind of interesting. So the first part is very handheld, very intimate, very up close, and then when they go apart, the film gets a bit more kind of like creative. Like I like how Kelly uses cross-cutting to like show how the kind of couples really kind of dates go, because essentially we see the intimacy of two people who are in love, and then you see the awkwardness of two people who aren't in love. So when we go out on their respective dates, you kind of there's a kind of like excitement of a date, but it's also the kind of awkwardness of it, and I like how that's kind of cross cut together. So yeah, it's a very simple premise as well. I'd imagine it was made very quickly. It has that kind of feeling. It feels kind of off the cuff, like the script feels kind of almost improvised. I'm not sure if it is, but like the conversation between characters feels kind of very real and kind of believable. Yeah, and I think it's just showing that like there's filmmakers out there who can make these type of films that we don't make in the UK, or certainly in Scotland. And I wish we did, because I think if you go to like, I don't know, Creative Scotland or the BBC or whoever you wanted to fund a film, I think maybe you have to like give a more kind of concrete premise, whereas actually just filming two people and sort of showing kind of like that kind of intimacy between characters can actually be really cinematic and interesting as well. And you don't actually need a really deep narrative to sustain people. I mean, saying that the film is only 40 minutes long, I think maybe if it was 90 minutes, maybe it would need a bit more narrative. But I think that's the good thing about short film.
I mean, yeah, short films give you that space to experiment and to try something that might only at the moment be able to be sustained to like 15, 20 minutes, but then you can return to that, to elements of that in longer work. Another short film that's even shorter, but even more, I would say, experimental and odd, is Will Anderson's new one. Will Anderson, friend of this house, he's been on various things we've done, Edinburgh-based animator. His weird homunculi were just, him and Ainsley's weird homunculi were just in Small Profits on BBC. But this is, so his new one that he's got in the Scottish competition is Existential Greg, which is this CGI Persian cat that I've seen him working on for a number of years now. I think he was talking about Greg when I chatted to him for a project we did a couple of years ago. And this is very much like, you couldn't do a full feature of this. Extreme close-up on an extremely hairy cat that then sort of like pulses into a ball of light and also like vomits on the floor. But I think I really enjoyed this as a showcase of like, this is an idea. This is an interesting thing. And this has potentially got legs going forward, but actually maybe the best expression of it for now is this little kind of moment in this cat's internal life that you can then like really dig into, and then by the time you get to the end of it, you're like, oh, I'm excited to see more of this. But it's quite a self-contained little thing.
Yeah, I guess it's maybe Anderson's most my stomach is rumbling like hell. This is his most experimental film, maybe. Like all his films, all his animations are always quite experimental, but they usually have like a kind of comedic hook, and this one's also quite funny. But yeah, it's like, it's like you say, just focusing on a cat's face for like 10 minutes and how the cat is reacting to being left alone when its owner goes out to the shops for 5 minutes. And I think he's really kind of pushing. He's also playing a lot with the animation techniques. So he's using, I think, this program, this open source program. I think we've discussed it on the pod before, called Blender, which was used to make Float and. Not Float. What's it called? Flow. And yeah, he's really pushing how to use it. So he's created this kind of 3D. I must confess, when I saw the clip, I thought initially he'd went proper old school and he was using sort of puppets, but it's a 3D model, and he kind of, as the film goes on, he kind of breaks it down and sort of, you see the kind of like skeleton and the kind of structure of it, and he brings it back together. So yeah, he's playing with form. He's like a real kind of animation for animators, I think, where he's kind of showing how it all works. But also, it's a film for cat lovers. And if you ever wonder what your cat's up to when you're off, getting some milk from the shop, it's coughing up hairballs and having a bit of a existential nightmare.
Yeah, and another one that if you watch it on a big screen, Christ alive, when that first comes on and there's just like an extreme close-up on the hairiest cat's face you've ever seen in your puff.
Yeah, and it doesn't really leave, I think, from memory, just like, I watched it 10 minutes ago, but like it's like almost all close-up.
Yeah,
there's a couple of scenes where it zooms out a little bit, but yeah, really in that cat's face.
Yeah, you're locked in and locked on.
And I should give a shout out to the sound design. Like, I think that's really what makes the film as well. Like the sound, I should look up who did the sound design. It was Keith Duncan. It's the grunts and snorts and the kind of heavy breathing of a slightly overweight cat is like perfectly done. And then you have this kind of amazing kind of orchestral score as well by Joshua Sabin. So yeah, really kind of nice piece of work.
Yeah. And then I suppose the last one we want to talk about is an example of how you can start something. So we all really enjoyed The Golden Spurtle. Documentaries are like a classic bit of a classic kind of area of short film, and one that actually looks really interesting from the GSFF program. Feels like it's in a similar vein, kind of. I couldn't watch it for various biometric ID Vimeo reasons. Community Theatre by Lewis Bailey.
Yeah, it's definitely in a similar vein. It's like a portrait of a slightly eccentric little town. Yeah, and it's definitely got a Wes Anderson sort of tinge to it, and it's very composed and beautifully shot. Yeah, it's just a really nice portrait. Essentially, what it's Lewis Bailey is the director. They've picked 3 random people or well, probably not random, but like 3 people from the town of different generations. So you have this kind of older retired fisherman called Carl, who calls himself the oldest teenager in town. You've got this more kind of glamorous middle-aged woman who drives a taxi called Caroline, and then you've got this young guy who's kind of out of work and who's a bit kind of down in the dumps, called Connor. And what the filmmaker does is they use the community theatre in town to recreate these 3 people's stories. So you just interview these people, and so the older fisherman tells them about the kind of glory years of how the town was. I should say it's in a town in Fife called Buckhaven, which I didn't actually know, but it's like near Anstruther, kind of that kind of area. Like so, yeah, the older gent is like a ex-fisherman. He tells about kind of the, when you can pull like herring out the sea with your hand and stuff like that. There's the kind of like the taxi driver. She's talking about how when she was younger, you would go to all the nightclubs. It was quite a lively kind of little town where like they would have kind of events every night for young people. You could go out and have a winch, And then you've got like Connor, who's basically representing nowadays, where there's like literally not much happening, So it's a portrait of a town in decline. And I think it's probably quite a recognisable kind of situation. But it also kind of marries it with this kind of idea that behind all that, there's this kind of community theatre, which is so vibrant and so fun and sort of actually has so much creativity that, it's kind of keeping the town alive almost. So it's a very kind of simple, smart idea to portray this little village and sort of use the one thing that sort of seems to be kind of thriving in the village, the community centre and the community theatre, to kind of tell the kind of more sad story of its decline from this hub of like work and fishing and sort of fun to kind of like a kind of rundown kind of place for young people where they might have to get out if they want any kind of future.
Yeah, and I suppose the kind of thing that shows you one of the great things about short films is what you're describing you can easily imagine extending to a feature film. So then it's like some things in shorts, you just like have a go at trying something and seeing if it works. Sometimes in shorts, you see somebody really focusing in on one thing and just telling one tiny little story, but with like the full power of film behind it. And sometimes you see something and you think, I'd watch more of that. I'd watch a lot more of that. So all these 3 films show as part of the GSFF Scottish competition strand, which we have a big kind of piece on the website if you want to go and read more about it. Community theatre is in the Small Town Joy programme, and Monogamy and Existential Greg are both in the Inner Chamber, which I think is the first programme, and then Small Town Joy is the third one. But it's all on the GSFF website. Glasgow Short Film Festival is on at GFT Civic House and the Grosvenor this year, and it runs until the 22nd of March. And I think that is it for the podcast today. We are at 56 minutes, and I'm certainly hungry. Jamie's a bit peckish. Ellie, bit of lunch? Spot of lunch?
Sounds
cool.
Good.
Right, well, we're going to go for a spot of lunch. But thank you for listening to the Cindy Skinny. If you've enjoyed it, tell somebody. Just tell one person, and then they'll tell somebody, and so on, and so on, and so on.
The butterfly effect.
Exactly. Or that bit in Wayne's World 2 where he's trying to sell tickets to Wayne Star. He needs 100 brown M&Ms to fill a brandy glass, or Ozzy won't go on stage that night. I could continue all day, but I'm also hungry. So goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.